I'll go from a high level to kind of like a more detailed approach, and then I'll walk you even through some of the characters and the intentionality and the psychosocial or the psychological exercises that are involved in this. But bear with me. So I'm going to push off a great summary that John provided. So this is a child trauma therapy approach developed for Ukrainian children impacted by war, displacement, and related traumas. And most importantly, that while this was developed in the context of war, the project can support and translate into any traumatic or trauma-related work, be it, child trauma as a result of domestic violence or abuse, a loss of a loved one, the natural disasters, whatever it may be. And, we all know that trauma is a very, very challenging experience and involves a challenging recovery process that is so hard to deal with on our own, especially for children. And today there are so many resources, literature, as well as practical tools that support recovery from trauma. But we really have seen that this approach is unique in many ways. It is obviously rooted in professional and evidence-based practice, but importantly, it has been tested for 9 years since the start of the Ukrainian war, which actually started in 2014, not in 2022 as we know it. It has roots that go much farther. So for 9 years, psychologists all over Ukraine have been using this approach. And, we have heard testimony, seen the evidence that while it is very simple, it has proven to be both very effective, both with adults and with children. Our partners have seen adults and children grow in faith, in strength, in resilience. They have shown children, or they have seen children rise up to help adults in very difficult circumstances of, grief, pain, fear, and death associated with the conflict. Now, as John mentioned, again, the therapy mechanism is a toy stuffed bear. So Upanchyk is right here. And, just to show you, so it's kind of, I think teddy therapy has been around for like 80 years. So this is not a new part, but it's a huggable bear. So he can hug you. He's very soft. And the author of this, she was very intentional in terms of like, even his little eyes are hand sewn. And he's very soft. The fabric, everything is very pleasant to the touch. And then he has a little pocket under his left arm. And this is meant kind of for children to tuck their valuables or, their prayers into him. And then he has a little backpack where he carries the dreams of the children. So they can put in there their wishes or their dreams, and Upanchyk is able to carry that for them. And the stuffed bear is combined with his journey, his own story, where a traumatic event, a fire in his home forest, causes him to be displaced, to flee, and to kind of journey on his own path of recovery. And the children come along with him on that. And the uniqueness of the two, because there are many, teddy therapy approaches or just child trauma techniques that are similar to what is offered here. But when you put the two together, and we have seen this even with our own children that we tested like guinea pigs, because you don't have to sign consent forms or have liability on your own children. But there is just a connection that's developed when a child is able to not only love a teddy and sleep with him and carry him and, maybe tuck the valuables and tell him their dreams, but also learn about his journey. And in fact, unbeknownst to them, journey in their own, distress or worry or even trauma with Upanchyk, with the little bear. So the storybook, I'll tell you a little bit before I jump into a PowerPoint to show you more visually. But the storybook includes two narratives. So on one page there's like, if you open it up, one page will include, this is just the beginning, so I might use a different one here. For example, one page will include the actual story or plot line. I don't know if you can see that, but we'll look into it later. And that is the story, as Upanchyk journeys, he encounters characters, he grows in strength, and we'll look at that more. But it's also, there is parallel guidance or a parallel narrative, and that is, it involves tools and exercises for a facilitator or even a psychologist to be doing with the children as they read the book. So ultimately, the aim of the project is to enable children or adults, this has been done with adults as well, to cope with traumatic events, both physically and psychologically, so as not to get stuck in the trauma, but rather to build their resilience and to foster post-traumatic growth. Again, if there are terms that are foreign, we can discuss them afterwards. We'll make sure there's time for question and answers and discussion. And just a little bit more. So in the story, the children actually experience how the little bear overcomes his own trauma on multiple levels. So we see spiritually how Upanchyk finds a new mission and purpose, and that's all he's catapulted through his own event. Then emotionally, he works through a lot of his own fears and stresses and emotions on his journey. And then finally, physically, where he finds a new forest home and he builds his own little den in that new home. The practical exercises, they include art therapy, different types of physical exercises to help the children to actually understand their own inner world or their own state, to identify, express and release some of the emotions they may be holding. And this is done both verbally and through art. And this supports obviously the child's physical and psychological health. As we know, many of sicknesses are rooted in mental and emotional distress, especially in children. And as well, the child is helped to calm down, relax, and release some of the stress and anxiety they may feel. They are fostered to reconstruct, and they see how Upanchyk does this, a traumatic event in such a way as to find new meanings and new solutions, and even to tap into new resources within themselves, even under difficult circumstances. Then improve their own mental and emotional health and find new paths to realizing their own potential. So as we go through it and as you read it, you will see that there's a lot of symbolism in the fairy tale. For example, I'll just say one, kind of a critical one and easy to adapt, is the scarf. So the scarf is meant to symbolize care and warmth and coziness and protection. And so even, Upanchyk talks about his closet where he has many different scarves. And so this one is in the color of a Ukrainian flag. So there's an identification that takes place for Ukrainian children with Upanchyk. Similarly, if it's in a different context, the scarf can be adapted to foster more of that identification. And then finally, the book examines an important social pathway, namely, where are you coming from? So we see where Upanchyk is journeying from, and what are you carrying with you? It examines that in a very simple way. Who do you meet along the way, and what do you take from them? What do you give back to them? How do you receive care, and how do you yourself care for others? Who is your friend? And finally, where are you going, and what do you find along the way? And so in application, it is designed, obviously, a lot of it is used with children, but it can be used with adults and has been. And it should be rolled out in about 8 or 10 sessions, depending on the ages of participants, their psychological state, and the facilitator's own experience. And when used with children, there's also an opportunity for it to be played out like a puppet show. So I'm going to jump into the PowerPoint, if that's okay, just to give you, disabled here. I think I have to, Katya, how do I get to the,
Yeah, we're just working on it right now. Hold
Okay,
on.
awesome. No problem. So what I'll do while they're working on it is just give you a bit of a visual glimpse, and
Here you
then,
go. You're set now.
great, thank you. And as you see, thank you. We are also going to show you some pictures from our experience as we go along. Okay, so are you able to see? Okay,
Yes, we're there.
okay, amazing. So here we go. So here's Upanchyk, and it sets up the scene of this beautiful bear. It's a really kind of simple but warm story. In his beloved forest, he loves his scarves. He thinks animals look way more elegant in the scarves. I don't know if you read the Word version or if you looked into the PowerPoint, but ideally, please look at the Word version for the story because that is our final, well translated version, as opposed to this, which is quite rough. So we sent you this just so you can get a picture of the book, but we're in the process of putting the final draft into the visual so that we can print the English versions. And so here, this is just a picture of children in Italy who are who have leukemia and another form of cancer, and who are also being led. These are Ukrainian children being led through some of the activities. In this case, they're kind of doing an introduction where they're drawing different scarves and discussing colors and their meanings. Because even in the book, the facility or the psychological guidance also kind of goes over the meanings of colors. And then we have the forest that is being burnt. So that's Upanchyk's own traumatic event, is his beloved forest is burnt and he has to go away. And so here, there are some activities all about, children exploring what is valuable. And if there is a crisis, what would they take? So some of the activities include draw what Upanchik took for the road, or imagine you carrying a bundle. What would you put in there? And there's a discussion about what in children's opinions is valuable. These are also kids that are deaf and mute who were doing this exercise, and they drew their own little pictures of what they recommended Upanchyk take for the road. So as it goes along, it begins to build. So here, Upanchyk meets wise Ella, the owl, and she offers her help. And there's a variety of exercises here that emphasize, one, the need to receive help, but also help children to calm down and then to express their emotions. So calm down exercises that are meant to calm down are anything from a breathing exercise, a candle. So you pretend, you get children to pretend they smell a candle and they blow it out. And in the process, you get them to breathe deeply in order to calm them down. There is a wings exercise, which is a tapping exercise, also a psychological technique to get your heartbeat to calm down. There is an exercise for urgent spot. The children are taught that there is a little spot in your hand where if you push it for a certain amount of time, it helps you calm down a little bit. So this is all getting, after a certain traumatic event or distressful event, you're teaching them to calm down. And then you go into expressing and identifying emotions they may feel. And there's exercise, particularly done through art therapy, that work through the emotions with them. And Upanchyk is working through his own emotions. So next, here is actually a really fun activity. So this is expression. This is one of the emotional expression activities. And this is done during our training in Poland that we had recently, where we got together different leaders from all over Europe who work with children and, did this training, taught them some of the techniques. And it's funny because in the end, they said, oh my goodness, even though we're learning this for the children, this released so much within us because they themselves, a lot of them are refugees, Ukrainian refugees themselves working with refugee children. And you can see they're having a lot of fun. And this is just about releasing your emotion through splattering and letting it out through paint, which there's 3 paint colors that are used, and every color is symbolic, but you're not told that until the end. So you just kind of go with your subconscious desire to let it out. And interestingly, after they finished this, a lot of them just began to sing hymns. And so that showed, this process of release that did take place. Similarly, some other pictures of the same activity done with children. So then Upanchyk continues on his journey, and he meets Prickles the hedgehog. And here, the exercise is all about sandpaper. So the children are given, okay, this is not a good example because this is the aftermath, but they're given a piece of sandpaper, and what happens is Upanchyk sees this hedgehog who's working in his wood shop, and he is using sandpaper to sand down and smooth out some wooden toys. And Upanchyk says, "Can I try?" And the Prickles gives him the sandpaper, and he feels it. It's so harsh and hard. And then he has this urge to draw something on it. And so the activity is about drawing something beautiful on sandpaper and overcoming the harshness of the sandpaper. And in the process, learning that, even the hard things in life, we can make our own story. We can make something beautiful out of them. Again, I'm kind of whipping through this, but hopefully this gives you a bit of a picture. And here are some examples of the drawings that emerged during different trainings. I think these were in Ukraine. So where people were given the sandpaper and told, life is tough, life is rough, it is hard to the touch sometimes, but we're able to overcome that harshness and draw something beautiful despite it. So the next activity or the next encounter is with Honey the bee. And this is all about, again, coming to a place of safety and calmness, and then replenishing the children, replenishing the adults, and getting them to tap into some resources that they may not have known that are there. So Upanchyk meets Honey, Honey the bee, and she gets him to eat some honey and then take a rest under a beautiful tree where he just falls right asleep. And this portion actually has quite a few activities that are suggested for adults as well as children. But one of the most interesting activities is a skit that can be played out with a beekeeper, someone who takes the role and plays, is an actor and plays the role of a beekeeper, and he invites the children, and there is a hive that's made. It can just be made out of paper, or alternatively, it can be a pot of honey or honeycomb, but essentially the children are able to put their hands into the honey, take the honeycomb and eat it. And, even evidentially, honey is very therapeutic. There are even exercises where people sleep over honey hives, and the noise of the honeybees working and just the aroma that arises is very strong, has a very strong effect on the nervous system. And so here it's meant to really just provide the children with, help them absorb just an atmosphere of calmness and safety and kindness, and gain confidence in their own ability to care for themselves. There's also a suggested activity with adults, and it's about candle making. So you take actual beeswax, and you make candles out of it. Again, working with your hands in something natural. Sometimes I know in Ukraine they've made bread with women, and the process of creating that, the process of inhaling those natural aromas is actually quite therapeutic. So that is, in a nutshell, that part. But the beautiful scene here is, so the author of this approach, she has students all over Ukraine that are working on the front lines. And there's one man who has been working in villages right on the front line of the conflict, where children are exposed to the atrocities of war all the time. And so he had about, I think around 20 children that he did, this activity with. There's also, sorry, so this one is a relaxation activity that's also suggested with Honey the bee, where children close their eyes and they're taken to a safe place, and you narrate the story and you get them to imagine and just rest there. And so as this student, as this man narrated this safe place imaginary activity, all of the children fell asleep. No joke. And you can see that here with Upanchyk around their neck. They just were able to relax in such a way and release some of that stress and go to sleep. And that just shows, a little bit of that effectiveness. And it's really beautiful. It was a safe corner for children that, maybe have forgotten what safety and rest feels like. And this is, again, I talked about the candle making exercises. These are women in Ukraine, also in conflict affected areas. Some of them are wives of soldiers or men who have died. And they are making candles. And again, really have experienced just a sense of healing and restoration through that, and accessing some kind of internal resources that they did not know they had, in order to still make something constructive and productive in the midst of grief and trauma. Here are more pictures of the women working on candles. And again, you can see it in the bottom. I don't know if you can see that, but it's like a coconut candle. So that's just to show that it is adaptable. Whatever the materials are in a certain given area can be used. We're getting there, but the next character Upanchyk meets is Nora the Nightingale. And this is really beautiful because this now is about fostering post-traumatic growth and helping others, learning to help others and not getting stuck in our own experience and pain of trauma or distress. And so here Upanchyk is walking through the forest, still seeking for a new home, and he meets a nightingale who's grieving over a destroyed nest. And he begins to help her build this nest. And a suggested activity is called a family nest, where children, and I can demonstrate that here, where children are given some straw, some dried grass, some twine, and they create their own family nests. There is a guidance or a kind of a caveat that if these are children who have been orphaned as a result of war or have lost their families, we just make it a nest. We don't talk about a family nest in order not to traumatize them further or cause deeper pain. But here you see children making nests, and it's a family nest. So the facilitator then leads children in a conversation about family stories and family traditions to get them back to a place of, what does happiness in a family look like? What kind of traditions can we keep in the midst of maybe a very difficult circumstance, or in the midst of conflict or violence or disaster, or displacement? So it's all about, nurture and creating something, and then in the context of Upanchyk, starting to help others in the midst of your own recovery. The next character that Upanchyk encounters is Maestro the Beaver. And these exercises are all about teaching, those you're working with, children, adults, to apply their own efforts to realize their goals and their dreams. So once we come to a place where we're able to help others, we're able to start building something for ourselves. And a few exercises here involve a blank puzzle where you're given, the puzzle pieces, they're all collected, but it's blank. And the children or adults are able to just draw their own picture on them, and then they deconstruct them and put them together again, which ends up being not so easy on your own drawing. And it's just about, fostering that understanding that even our own dreams, our own goals take effort and are often not easy to realize. Another activity here, and the beaver gifts Upanchyk a magic wand. And so an activity that's done with children is making their own magic wands. But the beaver tells Upanchyk that the magic only works when you apply your own efforts, because this takes place during a process where Upanchyk is looking for logs and timber to build his new den in this new forest that he comes to. And so it's all about, understanding that building something, and for us to move forward and to realize new goals and dreams, we must apply our own efforts, and we must work hard to do that. Okay, and here, this is again the training we had for the child workers in Europe. And you can see they've drawn their own puzzles and now they're putting them together. I think I have a few examples here. This is a bit simpler. Just someone drew a simple puzzle and put it back together. And the process just points to the fact that it's not so easy. It's easy to draw, but not so easy to construct. And then finally, Upanchyk has made his little den in this new forest where he feels at peace in. He's met a lot of friends along the way, and so he invites them to a housewarming party. And they all get together and they have a tea ceremony. And this final activity is about, you have a variety of dried herbs or spices, and the children or the adults you're working with can create their own tea blends. And in the process, they taste them, they say if they're good, if they would have done something different. But in the end, basically, this final part where they are able to make the tea over a fire is exploring the tensions that we often live in, where the same fire that caused destruction and caused the traumatic event in Upanchyk's life can actually be a fire that gathers and warms all of his new friends in a new home and does something productive like make tea or make supper. So it becomes a useful resource. We also, so as we conclude, or as the facilitator concludes, they're able to explore, how did Upanchyk change over the course of his journey? Did this difficult journey and the event that he went through, did it actually transform him? Did it make him more courageous? Did it tap into resources he didn't know he had? So he becomes more kind, more resilient, and he actually experiences growth instead of being stuck in his own pain, and finds a new mission, because in the end, Upanchyk is so grateful to his new community that he becomes the guardian of the new forest. And all of the animals feel very safe because the bear is the strongest animal in that forest. And so it's just a beautiful kind of ending of how he's able to find a new mission and a new purpose as a result of this difficult journey and as a result of his own growth through it. Yeah, so that's just a final picture of the training and all of the Upanchyks. And all of these people beautifully are now scattered all over Europe, working with, children, in this case, who have suffered from the war and are able to build resilience and provide coping strategies for those kids to overcome their trauma and then help their parents to overcome their own trauma. Before I turn it over to John or Katya or Vlad to add anything I may have missed, I want to mention that, we are often told, where's Jesus in this story? And so Jesus is left out somewhat intentionally. There are no explicit biblical references so that the facilitators themselves can own that part in a way that is very context specific. And they can weave, it's very easy, as you saw, the redemptive story, and just it would be very easy to weave a lot of biblical lessons and references into the story, but that is left to the facilitator and to the context. And in addition, as I've mentioned throughout, it would be very easy to adapt, and that is our hope, that we would be able to adapt both Upanchyk through his maybe scarf, as well as the story through the materials that are in it, the names, the exercises, to other contexts that would be able to help other children and other people going through similar trauma.